Here is my spey salmon rod. I'm just going to show a quick setup for basically how to set up a spey salmon rod. Firstly, what we've got is we've got the reel, which is already loaded with backing and running line. I'll show you how to load the running line and the backing, but I'll do them fast. So firstly, we'll just show how to do the backing. What we're going to do is, this is the backing. You're going to fold it over, make a loop, three times through. 1, 2, and 3. Pull gently, and there you have a loop. Now I'm just going to snip it, and there you go. Now all we got to do is put it on the spool, tighten up, and it's done. And then basically reel that up. Just take this as the loop of the running line. So again, there's your backing. You put the backing through the loop, make another loop, and 4 times through. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And pull. You can moisten, and there you go, nice and tight. Again, snip, and there you go. So then all you got to do is reel the running line onto the backing. So that's done. So next we're going to move on to the running line to a shooting head. The one I did earlier. You've got the backing and the running line. Now the running line, especially for shooting heads, has a very big loop, and there's a good reason for that. Now, like most of us, we carry our loops around like so, or you carry your shooting heads around like so. So the handy thing about big loop is that all you got to do is, we'll just put it down for a second, all you got to do is unfurl the fly line, which gives you the back of the fly line, or the head I should say. Now all you got to do is you put the running line through the shooting head, over the shooting head, and there you go. Loop to loop system, and perfectly fitted. So that's your running line, your shooting head. This is the shooting head, AFS shooting head. It's very similar to the new Scandi. This was the predecessor of the Scandi. Now the AFS is basically it's a 1 foot rear taper, 6 foot belly, and 31 foot front taper. That's a 9 weight, so basically 38 feet. Now the reason I use the AFS is because it'll carry most tips up to a 7 inches per second sink in 10 foot. I use 10 foot sink tips, versileaders. Now be honest about it, I use mostly 2.6 inches per second sink rate, and a 3.9 inches per second sink rate. As I said, in a 10 foot. This is a 13 foot rod, so 10 foot's good. 15 foot's a small bit heavy. Now, I'll cast all the sink tips from intermediate right up to 7 inches per second in 10 foot only. Anything beyond 7 inches per second sink rate, you're talking you'd need to get a Skagit line. I wouldn't use a Skagit line on a spey rod. It wouldn't take it. Now, it would be under pressure, and you're better off just getting a Scandi rod to do that for you. Now, you won't use a Skagit line that often, but if you're in areas where the back cast is very bad, you've got no space, that's when you're going to use a Skagit, or when you're going to start casting the big heavy tips like the MOW tips and the T tips. These things are 10 and 12 inches per second sink rate, and you're going to need a Skagit line for that. But other than that, I'll stick with the Rio AFS or Scandi lines for most 95% of the fishing. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about next is the sink tips. So we'll go and we'll connect the fly line up to a sink tip. I use the Rio versileaders. This is it. Now, the reason is because when they started making sink tips, I'm using them almost 30 years. When they started making sink tips, you just basically had a lump of lead core, that was it. And then they transitioned into a type of a braided sink tip. And then they transitioned into these, which are the newer version. Well, there is a new tip out, but these would be what I would call the basic good tip. The idea is that it's heavy butt section, very slim front section, and on top of that it gives excellent tapering, so therefore when you cast it throws out the tippet beautifully and the fly. Now, I see a lot of people using just standard flat sink tips. They splash on the water. That's not good. Normally the fly doesn't get pushed out in front of the sink tip. That's an important part. That's probably one of the most important things of salmon fishing. Get the fly ahead of everything. Get it ahead of the sink tip and the tippet. It has to be straight. So that's where tracking comes in. It needs to be tracked dead straight. So it's no good casting 30, 40, 50 yards and having the fly fall back behind the fly line. That's not good. You've wasted the cast, and besides that, it'll probably only start fishing about 10 yards or 10 feet in from the bank on your side. So you've lost about 60% of your fishing straight away. Now, as I said, these give great presentation. Nice draw. These give great presentation for casting. So basically what I mean by that, I mean turnover. So the presentation will be turnover and how the fly enters the water. In other words, it makes sure it's the last thing that's away from you. Head, your floating head. So basically, sink tip, that's the butt section, goes over the fly line. The end which goes to your tippet, which is the clear section, goes through, and just pull it through, and there you go. Nice and neat. That's it. Fly line to sink tip. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on a tippet. Now with most of my sink tips, I use anything from a 2.6 onwards to a 7. I put 3 foot of a tippet because I want to fly down with the sink tip. Now if it was intermediate or a tapered leader, I put 6 foot, maybe 7 foot of, as I said, tippet. Because nice transition, but also you need that small bit extra when you're casting with lighter tips. Okay, so you need about 6 foot of line, maybe 7 foot of tippet to add to an intermediate or a tapered leader. But when it comes to sink tips, 3 foot is good. Now I'll show you how to put on the tippet. Right, so we just measured out 3 feet. So it's good enough. Now, very simple, fold it over and then loop and twice through the loop. 1 and 2. Pull it tight, moisten, and there you go. Nice loop. Now we'll just snip it. And again, over the sink tip, and then the bottom of the tip of the tippet goes through the loop of the sink tip, and just pull them together gently, and there you go. Fly line, sink tip, and tippet. Now, fly. So, to go to fly, here we go. Salmon fly, tippet through the eye of the hook, fold it over, and 4 times through it. So it's a 4-turn uni knot. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Moisten, pull tight, and snip. And that's it. The fly, your tippet, your sink tip, and your fly line. As I said, there you go. Complete setup. Backing, running line, shooting head, sink tip, tippet, and fly. That's it. That's everything you need to know about setting up a salmon rod, a spey salmon rod. Okay, now all we got to do is catch some fish. I use the Rio versileaders as my sink tips, and this graph shows the ones I use, which are the red and the green sink tip, which are 2.6 and 3.9. I also use the clear intermediate, which is a 1.5 in low clear water. The versileader has a very thick rear loop, and this tapers down to a fine clear front loop, and that's what gives it excellent turnover when casting.